All right, let's get our hands dirty today and dive into urban gardening. I'm really excited about this one.
Me too. Urban gardening, it's got its own unique challenges, but that's what makes it so rewarding.
Exactly. We've got the Natural Gardener's Companion here, which you all suggested, and it's packed with tips for making the most of small spaces.
Yeah, and we're focusing on those tough situations, like limited light and dealing with not so great soil.
Perfect. So let's jump right in. One of the first things that struck me in the book is this idea of going vertical.
Right, like forget those sprawling gardens you see in the suburbs. We're talking trellises, stacking those planters, maybe even making a living wall.
It's brilliant. I mean, in a city, space is precious, right? So using those vertical surfaces, it's almost like expanding your garden upwards.
Absolutely. And a lot of plants like vines, they naturally want to climb anyway, so you're working with nature, not against it.
The book even has instructions for building a trellis, specifically designed to support that spiral growth pattern of certain vines.
I love that. It's like giving them their own little plant jungle gym, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
Okay, so we're making the most of vertical space. But what about those balconies and rooftops? I mean, they seem perfect for gardening, but weight limits always worry me.
Oh, yeah, that's a smart thing to consider. The book talks about that too, like checking those structural limits before you go crazy with heavy planters.
Good point. So maybe using lighter materials like, I don't know, recycled plastic or those fabric grow bags.
Exactly. You get that lush look without, overloading the structure.
Okay, that makes sense. But even with vertical gardening and rooftops, sunlight can be a big issue, especially in a city.
Absolutely. The Natural Gardener's Companion has a whole section on that. It's all about becoming a microclimate detective, basically.
What does that mean?
Observing how the sun moves across your space, really paying attention to where those sunny spots and those shady spots are throughout the day.
Oh, that's smart. So you're not just randomly placing plants wherever, you're actually mapping out your space based on the sunlight.
Exactly. And then you can choose plants accordingly. Some love that full sun, others prefer a little shade.
Right. And the book has tons of recommendations for shade-loving plants. It's not all about tomatoes and peppers. There's a whole world of possibilities, even in those darker corners.
Oh, yeah. Hostas, ferns, some leafy greens, they can all thrive in those shadier spots.
The book even mentions using mirrors or light-colored surfaces to bounce that sunlight into those darker areas.
Yeah, like a design trick, but for plants.
Love it. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, soil. Urban soil, it can be pretty rough, compacted, maybe even contaminated, or sometimes you just don't have any if you're doing containers.
Right. The book really stresses soil testing, especially in the city. Gotta know what you're working with.
And they even have this DIY recipe for a simple soil test, like with stuff you probably already have in your kitchen.
That's so cool. Yeah, so once you know what you're dealing with, you can start amending the soil, like adding compost, aged manure, things like that, to improve drainage and add nutrients.
Right. And if your soil is just a lost cause or you're lacking that ground space, containers are the way to go.
Yeah, containers are great. You have complete control over that growing medium, so you can really tailor it to your plant's needs.
The book actually recommends creating a soil blend library using different ratios of compost and other stuff. It's like becoming your own little soil scientist.
And it's fun. You can experiment with different blends for different plants. It's all about, getting to know what each plant likes.
This is making me want to ditch that store-bought potting soil and get my hands dirty with some DIY blends.
It can be so rewarding. And it really connects you to that science behind gardening.
I love that. So we've talked space, light, soil. Is there anything else we need to consider for urban gardening?
Well, there's one thing that often gets overlooked in urban environments, and that's pollinators.
Ah, right. Those busy bees and butterflies, we need them.
Exactly. The book suggests creating little pollinator pit stops throughout your garden, even if it's just a small balcony.
Like what? How do you do that?
Planting a variety of flowers that bloom at different times, so there's always something for those pollinators to munch on.
Oh, that's a great idea. So you're not just helping your own plants, you're actually supporting the whole ecosystem, even in a small way.
Exactly. Bringing a little bit of nature back into the city.
Awesome. All right, so we've learned to think vertically, become microclimate detectives, and even make our own soil blends. What's next on our urban gardening adventure?
Well, now that we've got those basics down, let's get into some specific techniques for really maximizing those small spaces, turning those challenges into opportunities.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's talk about, one technique I really like, especially for small spaces, it's called companion planting.
Companion planting. Okay, I've heard of that, but I'm not sure I totally get it.
Yeah, it's basically like, strategically pairing up your plants.
So they like each other.
Exactly. The Natural Gardener's Companion actually has a whole list of companion planting combinations. It gets pretty specific.
Really? I thought it was just about, like, looks, choosing plants with colors that go well together.
Oh, there's definitely that aspect too, the aesthetics. But the real magic, it's about those symbiotic relationships between the plants.
Symbiotic?
Yeah, like some plants release chemicals that can repel pests, while others attract beneficial insects, or some might even improve the soil for their neighbors.
So they're actually helping each other out.
Exactly. And the book has some great examples for like urban gardens specifically.
Like what?
Well, one example is planting lettuce with taller plants, like sunflowers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so the sunflowers provide shade for the lettuce, keeps it from, bolting in hot sun.
That's so smart. So you're saving space, A&D, creating a better environment for the plants.
Right. Another technique the book talks about is succession planting.
Succession planting. Okay, another new one for me. What's that?
So instead of like planting everything at once, you're kind of staggering your plantings throughout the season.
So like planting in waves?
Exactly. So let's say you plant a row of radishes. Once they're ready to harvest, you pull them up and plant, carrots in that same spot.
Oh, that's a great way to keep things going.
Yeah. Keeps that space productive all season long.
Especially if you got a small space, that's really important.
Absolutely. And they even have a chart in the book. It helps you figure out like which plants work well together for succession planting based on your climate and stuff.
Wow, this book is amazing. I'm learning so much.
Right. Okay, there's one more technique I wanted to mention. It's called espalier.
Espalier. I feel like I've heard that somewhere, but...
It's where you train like a tree or shrub to grow flat against a wall or a trellis.
Oh, yeah. Like those fruit trees you sometimes see growing flat against a brick wall, right?
Exactly. They have these beautiful fan-shaped patterns.
It's so elegant. But can you do that with any plant?
Well, it's most common with fruit trees, but you can actually espalier a lot of different plants, like flowering vines, even some vegetables like cucumbers.
No way. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah. The book actually has a section on espaliering melons vertically.
So cool.
It's a great way to save space and, add some visual interest to your garden.
And the book has instructions for building those espalier structures.
Yep. All with simple materials you can probably find around the house.
Okay, so even if you don't have a lot of ground space, you can still create this abundance and beauty with these vertical gardening techniques.
Absolutely. It's all about, being creative and adapting those traditional gardening methods to the urban environment.
I love it. So we've covered vertical gardening, soil blends, succession planting, even espalier. What else does the Natural Gardener's Companion have for us?
Well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about sustainability. How to make your urban garden more eco-friendly and self-sufficient.
Oh, that sounds interesting. I'm all about that sustainable life.
Okay, so one of the key things the book talks about is rainwater harvesting.
Rainwater harvesting. Okay, that sounds cool. But I always thought it was kind of like complicated,
Yeah, I know what you mean. But the book, it makes it seem pretty easy, actually.
Really? How so?
Well, they talk about setting up a rain barrel.
A rain barrel.
It's basically just a big container that catches the water from your gutters or your downspouts.
So all that water that would normally just like run off, you're actually capturing it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can use that water for your plants.
Makes sense. I guess I would save a lot of water, huh?
Oh, for sure. You're not using as much tap water, which is good for the environment and your wallet.
Right. And the book, they even talk about using like recycled stuff to make those rain barrels.
Yep. Old trash cans, things like that. Totally DIY.
I love that. So it's sustainable and budget-friendly, win-win.
Totally. And here's something I didn't know. Rainwater is actually better for your plants than tap water.
What? Really? Why is that?
Because it doesn't have all that chlorine and stuff that you find in tap water.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like healthier for the plants.
Exactly. And speaking of healthy, we got to talk about composting.
Composting. Okay, see, that's another thing that always seemed like a bit much,
Yeah, I get it. It seems kind of intimidating.
But is it really possible to compost if you like live in an apartment or don't have a ton of space?
Absolutely. The book has a bunch of tips for composting, even in small spaces.
Like what?
You can do a worm composting bin or a bokashi bucket or even just a regular compost bin.
Oh, okay. So even without a backyard, you can still make that nutrient-rich compost.
Exactly. And it's not just about the nutrients. Composting also helps with soil structure, water retention, all that good stuff.
It's like giving your soil a superpower boost.
Totally. And have you ever heard of compost tea?
Compost tea. That sounds kind of strange.
Yeah, it's basically like a liquid compost.
Oh, interesting. So what do you do with it?
You use it to fertilize your plants. It gives them this amazing boost of nutrients and those good microbes.
So it's like a superpowered plant drink.
Pretty much. The book has a recipe for it. Super easy.
Okay, so we've got rainwater harvesting, composting, compost tea. Yeah. I'm starting to feel like we could create like a whole self-sustaining ecosystem in our urban gardens.
That's the idea. And it's not just about the sustainability. It's also about that connection with nature, you know?
For sure. Gardening can be so relaxing, so therapeutic.
Absolutely. And the book talks about creating a sensory garden.
A sensory garden, what's that?
It's basically using plants that appeal to all your senses. So fragrant herbs, colorful flowers, even adding wind chimes for sound.
I love that. It's like creating a little escape, a little haven, right in your own urban jungle.
Exactly. And remember, gardening, it's a journey, not a destination.
So true. You got to experiment. You got to make mistakes. That's how you learn.
Absolutely. So there you have it. With the help of the Natural Gardener's Companion, you're ready to create your own thriving, sustainable, and soul-soothing urban garden.
This deep dive has been amazing. I'm feeling so inspired, ready to get my hands dirty. Thanks for joining me on this urban gardening adventure.
It's been a pleasure. Happy gardening, everyone.